The Wanting Seed by Anthony Burgess. This was the day before the night when the knives of official disappointment struck. Beatrice Joanna Fox snuffled a bereaved mother's grief as the little corpse in its yellow plastic casket was handed over to the two men from the Ministry of Agriculture, Phosphorus Reclamation Department. They were cheerful creatures, cold-faced and with shining dentures, and one of them sang a song which had recently become popular. Much burbled on the television by epicene willowy youths, it sounded incongruous coming from the virile West Indian deep bass throat. Macabre, too. My adorable Fred, he's so sweet, from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet, he's my meat. The name of the tiny cadaver had not been Fred, but Roger. Beatrice Joanna sobbed, but the man went on singing, having no feeling of his business, custom having made it in him a property of easiness. "There we are, then," said Dr. Atkinson heartily, a fat gelding of an Anglo-Saxon. "Another dollop of phosphorus pentoxide for dear old Mother Earth. Rather less than half a kilo, I'd say. Still, every little helps." The singer had now become a whistler. Whistling, he nodded, handing over a receipt. "And if you will just step into my office, Mrs. Fox," smiled Dr. Atkinson, "I'll give you your copy of the death certificate. Take it to the Ministry of Infertility, and they'll pay you your condolence, in cash." "All I want," she sniffled, "is my son back again." "You'll get over that," said Dr. Atkinson cheerfully. "Everyone does." He watched benevolently the two black men carry the casket down the corridor toward the lift. 21 stories below, their van waited. "And think," he added, "think of this in national terms, in global terms. One mouth less to feed, one more half-kilo of phosphorus pentoxide to nourish the earth. In a sense, Mrs. Fox, you'll be getting your son back again." He led the way into his tiny office. "Ah, Miss Hirschhorn," he said to his secretary, "the death certificate, please." Miss Hirschhorn, a Teutonical Chinese, rapidly quacked the details into her audiograph. A printed card slid out of the slot. Dr. Atkinson stamped his signature, flowing, womanly. "There you are, Mrs. Fox," he said, "and do try to see all this rationally." "What I do see," she said with asperity, "is that you could have saved him if you wanted to, but you didn't think it was worthwhile. One more mouth to feed, more useful to the state as phosphorus. Oh, you're all so heartless," she cried again. Miss Hirschhorn, a plain, thin girl with dog's eyes and very lank, straight black hair, made a moo at Dr. Atkinson. They were apparently used to this sort of thing. "He was in a very bad way," said Dr. Atkinson gently. "We did our best. God knows we did. But that sort of meaningful infection just gallop that sort of meningeal infection just gallops, It just gallops. Besides," he said reproachfully, "you didn't bring him to us early enough." I know, and I blame myself." Her tiny nose wipe was soaked. "But I think he could have been saved, and my husband thinks the same. But you just don't seem to care about human life anymore. Any of you. Oh, my poor boy." "We do care about human life," said Dr. Atkinson, stern. "We care about stability. We care about not letting the earth get overrun. We care about everybody getting enough to eat. I think," he said more kindly, "you ought to go straight home and rest. Show that certificate to the dispensary on the way out, and ask them to give you a couple of pacifiers. There," he patted her on the shoulder. "You must try to be sensible. Try to be modern. An intelligent woman like you. Leave motherhood to the lower orders, as nature intended. Now, of course," he smiled, "according to the rules, that's what you're supposed to do. You've had your recommended ration. No more motherhood for you. Try to stop feeling like a mother." He patted her again, and then turned a pat into a slap of finality, saying, "Now, if you'll forgive me, never said Beatrice Joanna. I'll never forgive you, any of you. Good afternoon, Mrs. Fox. Mrs. Hirschhorn had switched on a tiny speech machine. This was reciting, in the manic tone of a synthetic voice, Dr. Atkinson's afternoon appointments. Dr. Atkinson's fat rump was turned rudely to Beatrice Joanna. It was all over. Her son was on his way to be resolved into phosphorus pentoxide. She just a damned sniveling nuisance. She held her head up and marched into the corridor, marched toward the lift. She was a handsome woman of 29, handsome in the old way, a way no longer approved in a woman of her class. The straight, graceless waist black dress could not disguise the moving opulence of her haunches, nor could the splendid curve of her bosom be altogether flattened by its constraining bodice. Her cider-colored hair was worn, according to the fashion, straight and fringed. Her face was dusted with plain white powder. She wore no perfume, perfume being for men only. Still, and despite the natural pallor of her grief, she seemed to glow and flame with health and, what was to be disapproved strongly, the threat of fecundity. There was something atavistic in Beatrice Joanna. She instinctively shuddered now at the sight of two white-coated women, radiographers, who, leaving their department at the other end of the corridor, sauntered toward the lift, smiling fondly at each other, gazing into each other's eyes, fingers intertwined. That sort of thing was now encouraged. Anything to divert sex from its natural end. And all over the country blared posters put out by the Ministry of Infertility, showing, in ironical nursery colors, an embracing pair of one sex or the other, with the legend, "It's sapiens to be homo." The Homo Sex Institute even ran night classes.
So that was a reading of the first scene of The Wanton Seed by Anthony Burgess. Um, really good book, highly recommended. This one was published in 1962, the same year that he published his more famous dystopia, A Clockwork Orange. And though it's not as famous as that latter work, I think it's a more prescient dystopia. It certainly speaks to our day and age more clearly than it does Clockwork. In two main details, or maybe three. It's it's a emphasis on population control, which is still a rage in too many circles nowadays. It's promotion of homosexuality, uh, not just some promotion but celebration. It's that's pretty on the nose, if you ask me. You look out into our world today. And thirdly, there's a sense of alienation that the main character feels. She feels like she's a foreigner in her own homeland because of the multicultural society, population that she lives among. She, as a white person living in a multicultural future London, can't help but feel this deep and wounding sense of alienation. Something I think a lot of modern Brits, not just Brits, a lot of modern Europeans, and feeling nowadays themselves. So those three things make it, I think, a lot more prescient than Clockwork Orange, and so more worked easier for us moderns to connect with. Um, the story is set in an indeterminate future, just like A Clockwork Orange, but one gets the impression here that it's set many centuries hence. It's a few things that give that gave at least gave me that impression. One, there's an existing world government, a functioning world government, a badly functioning world government, but a world government nonetheless. And that usually, and one that has fallen and risen a few times, and that tends to speak of the passing of many centuries. Um, at this late date, whatever it might be, there are only 3 languages that are still spoken in the world. And incidentally, the world is uh, portioned off by the world government according to the 3 languages, they being English, or Enspun, as that region of the world is known, Chinese, Chinspun, that is the name for that region, and Ruspun is the name for the Russian-speaking region of the world. And all the other languages are as dead as Latin for all intents and purposes. Again, that doesn't happen overnight. That implies centuries of uh, attrition. And the size of London, the city in which most of the story takes place in, also speaks towards many centuries having passed. It's a mega city at this point. It's a megapolis that sprawls from the southern coast of the island to up north to Norwich and as far west as Bristol. Yeah, it's a pretty big sprawl. Again, not something that happens except over time, especially in a world that has periodically gone for population control regimes. Lastly, it's something I'll bring up a little later. There's a statue in the middle of Bristol Harbor, uh, 300 feet or taller, something akin to our Statue of Liberty here in the States today, uh, of a robed male figure. But no one remembers who the statue was raised for originally. The two theories are it was raised in honor of St. Augustine or Pelagius, the I think 2nd century heretic. Yeah, 2nd century, I think. Um, and that has to do with the further theme of the book. Like many of it, like many science fiction book, it deals with the cyclical nature of history. In particular, it posits its own unique 3 cycle explanation of history. It has what it calls a Pell phase, a Goose phase, and an interphase that lies between them as one system breaks down and before the next system can come back up and come back up again. That's what the interphase is. Now, the Goose phase is named after St. Augustine, and that's characterized by a more freewheeling, laissez-faire government that accepts the fact that humanity is the men are fallen creatures, and it gives some leeway to their behavior, and recognizing that it can only control it thus far, only so far with its laws and prohibitions. The Pell phase is named after the heretic Pelagius, who once taught that we we can affect our own salvation, something that churches, for some stupid reason, is still accused of believing. But they excommunicated the schmuck for preaching that, you know, early in its history, 2nd or 3rd century. Pretty sure it's the second. Yeah. Anyway, so Pelagius basically preached that we can, by our own efforts, by our own fruits, by our own works, have some effect on our salvation, which, of course, salvation being a free gift of God, is not true at all. Um, anyway, so the regimes that take Pelagius as their patron saint of, so to speak, are characterized by their need to control humanity, believing that it can, through those controls, laws, and various strictures, um, mold the perfect human being or a more perfect human being, therefore creating a more perfect society. But both of these arrangements eventually break down. One, because it's too loose and eventually man's vices take over and affect a system-wide breakdown. The other one, because it's too controlling and eventually the control snaps and people fight back. And the controlling regime collapses of its own dead weight. This story is set at the end of a Pell phase. Society's breaking down, entering an interphase. Supposedly, there's another dust phase on the horizon somewhere. But the story takes place during the breakdown of a Pell phase, and it follows Beatrice and her husband, uh, Roland, um, but follows their lives through two separate threads because they are divided at the beginning of the story. He's on his way back home, but then gets waylaid by some gang of goons that the government's hired on to assert dying control. And he's arrested, so we follow him through jail, escape through jail, and then a odyssey through the countryside while civilization collapses around them, and things are people resort to cannibalistic orgies and the like, and through forced conscription into a manufactured war, which is the dying government's last effort to cull the population. And her story we follow as she tries to escape the mayhem of the city and go to relatives out in the country who are going through their own drama. Anyway, it's a really fun story to read. Very, like I said, holds up a really polished mirror to our own time, and I highly recommend it. And on that, I'll leave you and hope you're here for the next one. Until then, adios, amigos.